Hello everyone, I'm Michael from Heavyweight Boxing, and today we are looking at the potential heavyweight matchup between Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin. So Whyte has recently come out and said in a Sky Sports interview that he wants Povetkin next. I can't remember the exact quote he used, but he was basically saying that stylistically we're very similar, we both like to come forward, and ultimately the fight would just be a good old scrap. In response to this, Povetkin has also come out and said, I don't think it's him, but his team have come out and said that they are also open to this fight. So personally, I think this is a great fight. I agree with what Dillian Whyte's saying. I do think it has the potential to be a proper war. We've seen Whyte do it before, and also recently we've seen Povetkin with that Michael Hunter fight. He really came to fight. I like Povetkin as a fighter. Always comes to win, always comes to fight. So yeah, I think it would be a very good fight, and I do think the styles would gel very nicely. So let's jump into the kind of pros for both of these fighters for taking this fight. I would also do the cons, but to be honest, I don't think there's many cons for either fighter in going into this fight. The only con in really heavyweight boxing is that if you lose, you drop down in the rankings and you've got to climb your way back up. But there's no reward without risk. So let's start with Whyte, the pros for Whyte. I think he needs this kind of fight. He needs a fight with Povetkin. He wants a fight with a bigger name after that Mariusz Wach fight. A win against Povetkin, or just a Povetkin fight in general, would throw him back into that talk with the top heavyweights. So yeah, I think it's a fight he actually needs, wants to be back with the top mix, wants to be considered with the AJs, etc. And he's had his tune-up fight and wants to get back in there. So one pro for Whyte, and I think the other pro for Whyte would be it's quite smart what him and his team are doing in terms of their opponent selection. If you look at their past opponents, they've gone for very similar opponents to that AJ's fought, and I think he's doing this because he's trying to show that he can put in the same performance that AJ can against these opponents, and thereby warranting a rematch with AJ. Because if AJ has gone in and he's beaten Povetkin, he's knocked him out, and Whyte comes in only 2 years later or a year later, I can't remember the time frames, but a year later, and does a similar thing to AJ, or even does it in a better style, knocks Povetkin out in the second round, thereby shows, look, I've done the same thing as AJ, I want that rematch, let's get that fight going. So it's actually quite a smart move from Whyte, and a good choice in opposition, in my opinion. Povetkin, I think also it's a load of pros for this fight, big money fight for him. And he's getting a bit older, wants to secure the bag, so it's a smart move. And also as well, I think it's a good time to get Whyte. It's a good time to face him. After that Mariusz Wach fight, he didn't look himself. He's had a lot of controversy going on with the whole VADA situation. He's been a bit inactive. If this was the Whyte straight after that Rivas fight, before anything had broken out or whatever, I don't think Povetkin would want to go anywhere near Whyte. Do you know what I mean? He's just a dangerous fighter. But right now, he was heavy, he's at his career heaviest, I think it was, in his last fight. Couldn't put away a Mariusz Wach. Do you know what I mean? You're gonna for Povetkin, you might be looking at Whyte and saying, if he rocks up in a similar fashion to that, I could potentially do a job on him. So smart move from both fighters, I think. Definitely pros for both fighters. But anyway, let's get into what we think would happen in that fight, or more specifically, what we think either fighter needs to do to win that fight. So starting off with Povetkin, going into this fight, what does him and his team need to do? Well, Whyte is a very difficult fighter to come up against and it's the reason why he's probably one of my favourite fighters in the heavyweight division, is because he's got a bit of both in him. He can go to war if he needs to, and he's also a very underrated boxer. I think his boxing ability has come a long way. We've seen him go to war against the likes of Chisora, and we've seen him also use his boxing ability against the likes of Rivas. 12-round fight, and he pretty much kept him behind the jab, kept Rivas behind that jab for the whole 12 rounds, and came to quite a nice decision in that fight. So difficult approaching Whyte, because you can't even really say you want to draw him into a war, you want to draw him into a scrap, or you want to try and box him. But I would say you've got more chance of beating Whyte in a war than outboxing him in terms of Povetkin. I think Whyte is overall probably technically a better boxer than Povetkin at this stage. And I would say Povetkin, in terms of strategy, he's got to look at Whyte's weaknesses. And the first one, we don't know is a weakness yet, but he's been out of shape. He's been out of the ring, as I've just gone on about. So his stamina, his fitness cannot be 100%. And any heavyweight usually tires towards the end of a fight. So I think Povetkin is definitely going to be looking to take him late into the fight and hoping fitness might play a part in that. He's been a lot more active than Whyte, so that could play a part. And then the second thing I'd probably say is a weakness of Whyte's, and something that Povetkin could exploit, is Whyte's lapses in concentration. Now, the main example of this is in the Rivas fight. He was boxing himself to a comfortable victory against Rivas, and then I think it was 10th round or something, he crosses his legs, switches off, and gets nailed with a right hand, I think it was, and dropped instantly. Luckily, it was only a flash knockdown for Whyte, but if Povetkin can hit him with a shot there, hit him cleanly, Povetkin has still got some good punching power and can knock him out. I think that's Povetkin's still one of his strongest attributes, especially at his age, is that punching power. It's the last thing to leave you. So I think Povetkin, looking to take the fight late, looking to possibly make the fight a bit scrappy. I think it's always a good move to try and draw Whyte into a bit of a war, but I think it's harder to do now than it was earlier in his career. I think he's become a lot more mature, Dillian Whyte. So drawing him into something like that might be harder than we think. But I think definitely for Povetkin to take the fight late and keep the pressure on him and try and land one of those hooks. Or I'm not saying he's got a puncher's chance, but in my opinion, Povetkin is only winning this fight by a knockout. I just don't see him winning on points against Whyte. But anyway, that would be my analysis for Povetkin. Going into Whyte, what has Whyte got to do against Povetkin? Well, I think approaching this fight in a similar way to the Rivas fight would be quite a smart move from Whyte's team. I think Rivas and Povetkin have many similarities. They're a bit smaller heavyweights, fairly good movement. They're going to try and look to slip the jab and work on the inside. So I think Whyte, he needs to focus on what he did against Rivas, keeping Povetkin behind the jab, and also I think just looking to land that left hook at some point. I'm not completely convinced on Povetkin's punch resistance now. Obviously, I've said it a few times in this video, Povetkin's old or whatever. He's not that old, but I do think there's questions around his punch resistance. You know, when you're seeing fights like what's his name, David Price and stuff like that, causing him real damage. In most of the fights, the knockout AJ did to him was pretty fucking brutal. So I think there is definitely question marks around that punch resistance. And punch resistance, good or not, there's very few fighters in the world who could withstand Dillian Whyte's left hook. So I think looking to outbox Povetkin, if he doesn't get the knockout, if he doesn't have to look for the knockout, I think he can outbox him, keep him behind the jab. If Povetkin gets in close, then yeah, you might have to scrap it out a little bit, but we've seen him do that plenty of times. And yeah, potentially looking for that left hook knockout or a knockout in general. So my prediction for the fight, as you probably would have worked out, is I am predicting a late stoppage from Dillian Whyte. Although if I was to give a round, I'd probably say around 10 probably. I don't know, it's always a safe bet going for 9, 10 or 11, isn't it? By the time it gets to 11, most fighters can kind of withstand the storm. But yeah, late stoppage from Whyte. I would not be surprised if Whyte takes it on points, similar to the Rivas fight. But yeah, I would be shocked if Povetkin got the win here, especially if he got it on points. I would be quite shocked. But anyway, that's been my analysis. That's been my breakdown. Hopefully this fight does get made. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know if I'm chatting absolute shit, or let me know if you agree with me. And goodbye.